Time for me to yap. Let's freaking go, dude. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome in, welcome back. My name is Brooke, aka Brooks Moon. So I said I was going to post monthly recaps this year, and I then didn't do that. I am doing a recap in January, and then went to film it in February. And February, my life just kind of like derailed a little bit. However, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna hold off on doing a recap video. Just do a quarter of the year recap, but I didn't read as much as I wanted to at the beginning of this year. So this is my quarter of the year reading recap. I read a total of 13 books so far, which is over 25% of my reading goal. It's set at 40 at the moment. I feel very good about where I am right now within the year of hitting that 40 goal. I am trying to be super ambitious though, and like go above and beyond, because that's just who I am. Don't see that happening, but right now I'm on track. I think according to Goodreads, I'm like 3 books ahead of schedule at the moment, and part of that was because I read so many books for my romance deep dive video that I posted last month. So that kind of tipped me over the edge and put me way ahead of schedule because I was reading more specifically for a video, which I think is what's going to happen for the rest of this year. I have a bunch of other deep dive videos I want to get to this year because I had a lot of fun making the romance video. Watch it if you haven't. I have a feeling that like having a section of books to talk about for a deep dive video is just going to keep helping me hit my goals, which I'm super happy about, and the fact that I'm even able to stay that on top of it is pretty impressive for me, considering that I have like so much going on all the time. Just wanted to like consolidate all of what I've read so far into one video, just because I wasn't able to keep up with the monthly recaps. Depending on how much I read per month, I think is going to determine if I do a monthly recap or not, just because I don't want to do like another quarter of the year recap and it's like 30 books, because that would just be excessive. I'm gonna play it by ear each month. Some months you'll see me do a recap video, others you might not. It's just, it is what it is. Let's get into it and talk about some of these books that I've read. At the beginning of the year, I set my goals. I decided what I wanted to do. I made a video talking about some of the reading goals that I have at the beginning of the year. And then I also saw this video that was talking about how if you're trying to get back into reading in 2024, don't read a book that you're like semi-interested in or something that's like considered pretentious, because you're not going to be fully invested. You're going to put it down and then you're not going to keep up the habit. Read something that you genuinely want to read and super excited about. And so I took that advice and read one of the books that I got for Christmas that was gifted to me, and one that I was incredibly excited for, and that was The Chalice of the Gods. There's been a lot of discourse around Rick Riordan. I am not going to be talking in depth about this book as much as I was going to originally. When the show was announced and then Rick also announced that this book was coming out, I got very excited to revisit these characters. I love Percy, I love Annabeth, and I love Grover, and they are the trio that I grew up with. And I was so excited for this book to come out, and then I read this book, and I don't know, it just didn't hit the same. I don't know what it is. I don't know if Rick is trying to relive some of the things that he felt with Percy Jackson originally. You can kind of gauge that he was writing this while they were developing the show, because there's a lot of going back to things that happened in the first Percy Jackson book, which is what season 1 of the show was based off of. There's a lot of throwbacks in this book and a lot of references to things that have happened in the series. But I personally just think that Percy deserves to live his life without having to prove himself anymore. The premise of these books is that Percy has to work to get into college, and it's a college he wants to go to with Annabeth, and so he has to do these quests to get these rec letters from gods to get into college. Percy even mentions in the book about how ridiculous it is, considering he saved the gods' asses twice, which I agree. It did not hold the same weight as the other books did. Just, it felt off for me. I don't know why. The stakes did not feel as high as like the impending doom of the world. I read it because I like these characters. I kept reading because I like these characters. But honestly, the plot just was not it for me, like, at all. To me, it's just not necessary to Percy's character. I feel like we got a final conclusion with Heroes of Olympus, and the books feel more of like a fan service rather than anything else. The stakes don't seem as high. Like, yes, he wants to get into school, but in comparison to the stakes of the other books, it just seems a little bit less important. And I'm saying that as a huge Percy Jackson fan who grew up reading these books. It just was not the same for me this time around. Enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed being with Percy and Annabeth and Grover again. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that, like, characters who go through so much just deserve a break. Leave them alone. Leave Percy alone. Let them be. Let them live. They deserve to have peace, okay? Immediately following that, I decided to read another book that I was super excited for. It was short. I knew I was going to get through it really fast. It's by an author that I really, really love. And it just sucked me back into my fantasy nonsense. I read fantasy all year round, but there's something about reading fantasy books in the winter that just hits a little different. So the next book that I read is How the King of Ethelham Learned to Hate Stories. And this is a very, very short book. It's very small in comparison to the rest of her other Folk of Air books. But this is entirely from Cardan's point of view. This is me saying this. I don't know how many other people are behind me on this. I wished this book was significantly longer, because you're learning a lot about Cardan's past. All these tiny little stories that make up Cardan's character, and you're learning more about why he is the way that he is. It's based off of things that he mentions in the Cruel Prince trilogy. You see certain aspects of the Cruel Prince trilogy in this book from his point of view, and I wish there was more of that, because there are so many aspects of that trilogy that if we got to see his point of view, I think would have been phenomenal. And I really do wish that this book was longer. I love Cardan. He is #1 book boyfriend, always and forever. I'm ignoring the fact he has a tail. We're not going to get into that, okay? What I also really, really loved about this book is that it was illustrated. The illustrations in this book fit the vibe of this series so well. They are so beautiful. I love this book. I love her writing. I wish it was longer. I would eat up just the entire Folk of Air trilogy from Cardan's point of view. With 4.5 stars, it was a very quick read for me. I read it in a day and a half because I started it when I was working, so absolutely love this. This then drove me to read the next book that I'm going to talk about. Continuing my Holly Black brain rot, I then started reading The Stolen Heir. Holly Black does this thing where she absolutely steals me out of a reading slump. She gets me motivated to read. Her books are so dynamic, and I love her writing style. So The Stolen Heir is a duology of 2 books written by Holly Black that is following the events that happen in The Cruel Prince. It happens many years in the future, and you are following 2 characters that are mentioned in the Cruel Prince series that were very, very young in the series. That is from the perspective of Ren and Oak. Stolen Heir is from the perspective of Ren. And I'm not gonna lie, I had to take a second to even remember who Ren was, because her character was important in the last book, but so much happens in such a short period of time in that last book that I genuinely had to think about it for a second. A lot of people have opinions about these books because it's not following Jude and Cardan, and it's like, honestly, I didn't care. I really didn't. I enjoyed seeing these characters a little bit older later on down the line, and now you're following a completely different set of characters that are still connected to the main trilogy. I really liked how she jumped forward in time and aged both of them up, because now we're in a totally different mindset with different stakes, and there's still stuff going on in Ethelham, obviously. The dynamic between Ren and Oak, I loved that she was exploring this relationship between the 2 of them, and you get to see this character who you didn't get to see a lot previously, more fleshed out and more developed, and an entirely new set of stakes and backstory to follow. And I also really liked the integration of the mortal world in this book. She touches upon it lightly in the trilogy, but it's far more present in this book because of Ren and Oak's characters. I love how the mortal world and the fairy world integrate, and these mortals probably have no idea what is happening at all. You're understanding more about mortals and their connection to Ethelham, and why fairies hate them so much, and why they do what they do, and how common it is, because in the trilogy it didn't seem like it was a super common thing, but it's now more explored in this book, which I really, really enjoyed. She also does this thing where, she will set up certain things that you can kind of figure out the twist, and as you're relishing in the fact that you're like, oh my god, I figured out what was gonna happen, something else happens and blindsides you. And every time she does it, my jaw drops, because she does it in such a wonderful and effective way that every time I'm like, oh my god. I'm giving this 4 stars. The World of Ethelham is one of my favorites. I love her writing, and yeah, so the book that followed these two, I kind of stayed in the fantasy realm of things. The next book I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I've been hearing about this book for so long. It's one of those books that went absolutely batshit bananas on Book Talk for a very, very long time, and a lot of people have a lot of mixed opinions about. I'm gonna lie, I ate this book up. I understand why there was hype around it. This was my first 5-star read of the year. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. If you hate this book, that's fine. I didn't, though. I understand why a lot of people disliked this book, and there are a few quips that I had with it, even though I did give it 5 stars. This book could have been at least 200 pages shorter. A lot of repetition in this book, where V. Schwab is repeating things in Addie's voice over and over and over again in situations that we have seen previously. I don't think you necessarily need to see more than once. We get it. She's been alive for a very, very long time. She made a deal with the devil and now she can't die. That's the whole premise of this book. Following her from the beginning of this curse and then later on down the line and going back and forth between time, I thought was very effective. A lot of moments where she does the same thing again that I don't think it was necessary. Yes, it drives home a point, but it's a point you catch on to very quickly. But what I loved most about this book was how this story just kind of makes you think about what it means to be alive and to have a life and to live that life as a human being. I was sobbing at the end of this book. It made me cry so much. You had Henry and you had Addie and how their stories just like interact with each other and what they mean to each other and what their characters mean in terms of what it means to be alive and what life is like and how to find like this richness that everybody experiences within their lives. There's a lot of times where Addie's character is pretty stagnant. She doesn't change much, even though she's been alive for as long as she has, and she's gone through a lot of historical experiences, but kind of is the same way even after those things, which to me didn't make sense. I feel like would read if you made the quiet kid of the class immortal. That's what Addie's character felt like. And I do wish you get to the point that is described on the back of the book of Addie and Henry crossing paths a lot sooner. But still, I ended up giving this 5 stars. The writing in this book is incredibly beautiful. It almost reads like poetry sometimes. This style made me feel was just so perfect for a winter read. To me, this book felt like how I feel when it's like a cold autumn day and it's raining and like the sun is starting to set, so it's getting a little dark and you have like candles burning and a cup of tea and a nice book and you're just like all cozy. That's how this book made me feel. I loved it. I loved every second of this book. I still criticize it a little bit, even though I did give it 5 stars, but I enjoyed this book so much that this is the first book of V.E. Schwab's that I've read because I do want to read more of her work. I said gave this 5 stars, easily became one of my favorite books. I will definitely read it again. The next 6 books that I'm going to talk about, I actually talked about more in depth in my romance deep dive video, so if you want more thoughts on each of those books, go watch that video. I worked really hard on that video, so please go watch it. I do have a lot more thoughts, and I'm gonna try to limit how much I talk about those books so I don't repeat myself. First of those 6 books was Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. This is actually one of the first explicitly sapphic romance books I have ever read before. This is a fake dating story that is about 2 characters, one that are pretty much polar opposites of each other, and they need different things from each other, and they start fake dating. And of course, you know how that trope always goes. I picked this up, I didn't realize it was the 3rd in a series, so I have to go back and read the other 2. But I liked the characters in this book. I liked Iris. I liked Stevie. And I really liked it. I thought it was really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was silly. It was a good read. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because it was cute and it was gay. And I liked it. I had a good time. It was fun. The book that I read was Something to Talk About by Meryl Winsler. This was also another sapphic romance book, but was kind of very different from Iris Kelly. Big difference being that this is a slow burn and Iris Kelly was not a slow burn. And I'm glad that I read them because I kind of got both ends of the spectrum when it came to like tropes of that kind. I think I enjoyed this one a little bit more, and the reason being is because this one is set in Hollywood. It is about Jo, who is a showrunner, and her assistant, Emma, just their relationship and how they interact with each other. I really enjoyed it. Very character driven. You're following their stories and their relationship with each other. And it, again, like I said, it's very slow burn. So there are going to be moments where you want to bang your head against a wall. I prefer slow burn romance. I think it's better, in my opinion, because you get to see this build up and it's cute. It's always so cute. Those small moments that happen between them just seem a little bit more special, and that definitely happens in this book. Those like small moments that happen just build up to a bigger thing. I also rated this 3.5 stars, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The next one that I read was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is actually the first book by Emily Henry that I have ever read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is rivals to lovers plus close proximity with so many layers of character development on top of it. There are so many themes that this book talks about, and it does it in such an effective way. The chemistry between the two of them was so good. I ate it up. This entire book, I was obsessed. I did not want this book to end. When it finished, I didn't want to leave here. I loved this universe. Emily Henry, I have fallen into the Emily Henry trap, and I do not plan to get out of it. Going to read all of her books, I think. I did far more than I thought I was going to, and found a new author in the process, so it was a win-win for me. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars out of 5. I genuinely do think I would read this book again, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of her books that are out. The fourth book that I read for that deep dive was Checkmate by Allie Hazelwood, the first book I've ever read by this author, even though I knew of her. I also didn't expect to like this book as much as I did, because the most I knew about Allie Hazelwood was Love Hypothesis and the fact that it was a Raylo fanfiction. I honestly never saw myself enjoying one of her books. But this one surprised me in the best way. It's about a girl named Mallory who was once part of the chess world, not anymore, enters back into it again because she is involved in a charity event because her friend convinces her to, and she ends up beating the #1 chess player in the world, Nolan Sawyer, in their chess match, and nobody knows who she is, so it creates this whole entire scenario that she is experiencing. It was witty, it was cute, it was so entertaining, like way more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. It was a fun read. I genuinely enjoyed reading it. I honestly wish that this book was a little bit longer just because of how it ends. I read it the same way I would enjoy reading a cute, fluffy, like, fan fiction. Allie Hazelwood did an amazing job of writing a down bad man. I was respectfully obsessed, and I was so here for it. I ate it up. Yes. I ended up giving this 4 stars because I had a really fun time. Don't know if I'm gonna read any more of her books. We'll see when that time arises. The next book that I read was A Little Bit Country by Brian D. Kennedy, and oh my god, I absolutely loved this book. I loved this author. Found him on accident. I'm so glad that I did. I really fell in love with his writing. This is a summer romance story about Emmett, who is working at Wanderworld in Tennessee, which Wanderworld is basically this universe's version of Dolly World, which is based off of this universe's version of Dolly Parton, who is Wanda Jean. Cool. We all caught up? Awesome. And this is about Emmett, who is working at Wanderworld, and he runs into Luke, who is also working at Wanderworld, but his grandma is actually Verna Rose, who had a falling out with Wanda Jean many, many years ago. So Luke hates country music. Is an openly out character. His biggest dream is to be the first gay country star. Then you have Luke, who knows he's gay, but he grew up in the South, so being completely out is not something that he's very comfortable with given his environment. Their characters help each other and they complement each other so much. I loved their chemistry. I loved the relationship between the two of them. That this is taking place in this world's version of Dolly World, and that there is this universe's version of Dolly Parton. The book was so cute and it was so lovely, and I fell in love with this writing style. Love how their characters worked together. I loved how their storylines came together, and the plot twist that happens in this book blew my mind. Like, I was literally jaw open, being like, oh my god. Developed in a way I didn't expect, but I absolutely loved it. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I've actually bought his other book that he's written, and I'm so glad that I found him because he is now one of my favorite gay authors. The next book that I read was What If It's Us, a co-written book by Becky Alberti and Adam Silvera. This was the last book that I read for my romance video, and I was genuinely so upset that this is the one that I ended on. All 6 of the books that I chose to read for that video, this was the one I hated the most. I genuinely did not like this book. It's a story about a meet-cute that happens in New York between 2 high school boys during the summer, Ben and Arthur. Arthur's visiting, Ben lives in New York. And they run into each other, but Arthur doesn't get Ben's name, and so he kind of goes out of his way to find Ben, which is like low-key stalking. So it follows their relationship from the start of their meet cute until the end of the summer. And their relationship starts rocky at best and barely gets better from there. I deeply dislike this book for a lot of reasons, but mainly because I'm not the biggest fan of co-written books. Sometimes they are very, very successful. This was not one of those cases. I don't have anything against co-written books. I have read a few that are actually successful in the way that the author's voices blend together and makes it a very unique experience. Like, you can tell who wrote which character because which one is more annoying. It's Arthur, by the way. It didn't work for me. It didn't. I don't like Becky's writing at all. Adam Silvera's I hadn't gotten into yet. I have more faith in his writing, though, than I did hers. I ended up giving this 2 stars because of the side character of Ben's best friend, Dylan, who was the comedic relief and honestly the best part of this book. After I finished reading all the books that I planned on reading for that video, I just needed to take a very, very far step away from romance, and even including like fantasy books that had romance in it. I am a mood reader, so like when I read a lot of the same genre, I have to read something else to keep my brain from just going completely mushy and turning into pure liquid. I decided to go into a very, very different route, and that was to read the autobiography Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. I've had his autobiography for a very, very long time, and I finally got around to it, and I'm very, very glad that I did. I absolutely fell in love with his writing in this. And if you don't know how Trevor Noah is, he has a very specific way of how he speaks when it comes to how he tells stories and how he tells jokes. And he has a very unique inflection of his voice and of his words, to the point where, like, I'm so familiar with it because I've watched him on late night for so many years when he was doing it, that I could hear his voice when I was reading. He talks about his life in South Africa and living during the time of apartheid, and how his existence alone is considered a crime at the time. So vivid and so beautiful. It would be so specific and outright horrifying, honestly, to believe that people put people in this situation at all, but then follow it up with such a hilarious way of him describing himself and something that he went through with such a comedic way of doing so. It was so well done. The writing of this book is so well balanced and it is so well versed. I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. For moments, I was genuinely like laughing out loud and making noise in the world around me as I was reading this book. In public, when I would be reading. The amount of times I would laugh or gasp or like literally go out loud, or there were many times I was honestly in tears because I was sucked in. This book had my full attention. The pacing of it was perfect. It was just so well written. It is the best book I have read so far this year. The way he laid out the details of his life is so beautiful. The way he talks about his mother is so beautiful. I urge everyone to pick up this book and read it. If you're not a big autobiography person, this book is going to change that for you, I promise you. This is my second 5-star book of the year, but it is the number 1. It beats out Addie LaRue by a long shot. It's the number 1 book for me so far this year. I don't know how many other books I'm going to read that are going to be able to beat this out, but I love this. Read this book. I loved it. You are going to fall in love with Trevor Noah after you read it. Read this. So this next book is actually the first of a series that I have as a priority for this year. I talked about it in my 2024 reading goals, and that is 3 Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. It's a fantasy story about 3 triplets that are born, and they each have different powers that exist within this universe. However, it is said that once they turn 16, only one of them can rule. So the sisters are expected to kill the other sisters, and only one can survive to rule. This is one of those fantasy books that has a very elaborate and specific world that exists. You learn a lot about this world and what it is and what makes up this universe in a short period of time. I got incredibly confused when I was reading this book at first, because there is so much thrown at you. Each chapter is in a different part of the kingdom where each sister is, because they each have different powers. Each power has their own land and settlement, and then within that, you also have their own groups of people that exist in these sisters' lives that are important to the story. There's a lot of names of people, places, and things in a very, very short period of time. Of course, it's a fantasy book, so they all have very unique names. A few times I had to like flip to the back of the book to remember which sister had which powers, because I genuinely could not get them straight at first. I eventually did. I do know who is who now. Me being confused is entirely on me. That has nothing to do with the book. That's just me, my brain, not being able to connect things. All that being said, I did really enjoy the story of this book. I liked seeing each sister's point of view as the story progressed. Learning so much as to why each sister is the way that they are, who these people are in their lives and why it's important, the moments in which the sisters' lives like overlap before this big event that's supposed to happen when they turn 16. Even after reading this book, don't think I can pick a side of which sister I want to root for. And also the twists in this book, I did not see coming whatsoever. I pride myself on being able to pick up on things like that pretty quickly, especially in fantasy books, because they will like sprinkle in like little details most of the time for you to be able to figure it out. I didn't figure it out. I had a feeling that things were going to go south, and they did towards the end. Like, you pick up on that, but the resolution that happened, the conclusions to the end of that, completely out of left field. Had no idea. Did not see them coming. I liked that I couldn't see these twists happening when they were happening, or what they were. It makes me want to read the rest of the series, honestly. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I have already started the second book, and I'm so excited to get fully invested in the series. I'm really looking forward to it. This is now the last book that I've read in the last 3 months, which is book number 13. This was one of my most anticipated reads of this year. It's another Holly Black book. That is The Prisoner's Throne by Holly Black. This is the second book in the duology of The Stolen Heir, and I was waiting so long for this to come out, and then it finally did. So excited when I was able to get my grubby hands on this, because my god. I started to get through this book super fast, and then I realized, oh my god, once I finish this, I'm not going to be able to sit with these characters anymore, so I started to slow down my reading pace by a lot, but then I ended up finishing it anyway within a few days after I started picking it back up again. I mainly think that that's because Jude and Carden were very present in this book, and I'm obsessed with them, so there's that. The continuation of what happened in Stolen Heir, but now we are no longer in Ren's point of view, we're actually seeing this book from Oak's point of view. I really liked that she swapped the POVs, but I really like that she gave us both, because I think both of their point of views and inner monologues are so interesting. In Stolen Heir, Oak is the one withholding information from Ren, and in this one, Ren is the one withholding information from Oak, and it was just so good. Reading Stolen Heir, I was able to kind of gauge where the story was going to go. I kind of had an expectation of what was going to happen to a degree. I had no clue whatsoever what the hell was gonna happen next while reading this book. That's just because we were in Oak's point of view, and he's a man. So, I don't know if that's why. Spoilers, but Oak pulls a Peeta Mellark level shock factor jaw-dropping thing. And I was like, okay. I had to pause and like look at the imaginary camera that was in my room, because I was like, there's no way that just happened. The level of emotion I felt reading this book was absolutely criminal, especially when you get to the last 25% of this book. I thought I was going insane. Holly Black did it once again. She had me in a chokehold when I was reading this story, and I am so glad that I picked up her books, because my god, I was so invested in this. I refuse to accept that this is the last time we're going to see these characters, because I want more. I want more of these characters. Please and thank you. When I finished this book, I genuinely like sat in my room and stared at nothing for an hour trying to process what just happened, because in the classic Holly Black fashion, so much happens in such a short period of time at the end, and I was trying to wrap my head around it, and I have not stopped thinking about this book since I finished it. One of those moments where you're like sitting and you're like trying to process what's going on, but you can't help but smiling because it was such a fun experience. It was so good. Please read Stolen Air and Prisoner's Throne and all of her other stuff because I love her writing so very much. This got 4.5 stars for me. I genuinely think I'm gonna end up reading all of her books again because I loved them greatly. I love these characters so much. They're quite literally my Roman Empire. I don't stop thinking about them. And those are all of the books that I have read thus far in the year 2024. Being at 13 is actually a pretty good number for me right now. At the moment, I'm on track when it comes to reading, so get this far in the video. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you. We have hit over 250 subs, which is insane. Thank you so much. It baffles me. My mind is boggled every time. So thank you so much for watching my videos and subscribing and sticking around. Next video that I'm going to be posting is later this month. I am genuinely so excited to film that video. I started scripting it already and I can't wait to put it out into the world. As always, my active social media links are down below in the description, so you can find me in various other forms. Be sure to like this video and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Do something nice for yourself today. Remember, you're loved, especially by me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!